Hello, folks, and welcome out to the Single Player Podcast. I'm your one and only host, I am 16-Bit, and I got a good show for you this week. We're going to be talking about how the ESA nearly doxed over 2,000 game journalists, the Ooblets saga, and the debate on violent video games, because some people can't stop beating a dead horse. So sit back, relax, enjoy the show, and we'll be right back after this. All right, folks, and we're back. And you might notice that there's been a slight uptick in the sound quality, and that's because I decided to stop being cheap and actually buy a new microphone. Of course, I got here a Blue Yeti, which I've used one of them before, and I actually really liked it. So I thought, okay, why not get my own? Anyway, the first segment I'm going to talk about is something really interesting that happened on August 2nd. A freelance writer named Sophia Norwitz broke a story about how the ESA may have accidentally doxed over 2,000 game journalists. It goes like this. Basically, on their website, they had a unsecured list of over 2,000 attendees from this past E3, and all mostly journalists. And not only does it include their name and their company, but it also includes their home address and their phone numbers. How do you do that? How you would think something like that would be so important that you take real careful and make sure that something like that didn't get out. And yet here it is right on the E3 website. You could download a list of 2,000 names, their home addresses, phone numbers, all that kind of stuff. The good news is that she got in contact with the ESA before breaking the story, and they were able to remove the page. So you can't get to it anymore. But the thing is, it's the fact that it was a potential doxing scandal. This could have been much worse than it actually ended up being. What is up with the game industry not being able to protect people's identity? Like, this reminds me of what happened with Sony. Remember that, the 2011 hack? It wasn't that PSN was down. It was also the fact that the hackers had actually stolen like several thousand people's personal information, and then Sony just decided not to tell anyone until a week later. I mean, that is just... So they basically waited until people could actually get away with it to eventually let people know, oh, by the way, if you see anything suspicious on your credit cards, you might want to check that out. It's like the sheer incompetency that is necessary to undertake that is truly amazing. That reminds me of a funny thing that happened at the time of the Sony hack. I was in an English class. This was in college. I was taking an English course, and the professor, because like I wrote one of our assignments was to write about some, I don't know, it was write about some problem in the world, and I wrote about tech security, how we need better, tighter security and all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned the 2011 PSN hack. Well, it turned out my professor was a massive Sony fanboy, because he wrote like in the margins, like went on these rants about how like the PSN hack was in 2010 and it wasn't that much and people's information wasn't stolen. And I'm like, oh, this is just great. Just what I need, a professor, someone who's grading my work, who is a massive Sony fanboy. Getting back on topic, what really annoyed me was the way the gaming media handled this. Now, the person who broke the story, Sophia Narwitz, she's more of an independent writer. She's not someone who works for a major publication. I think, like, she's a former writer for Niche Gamer. I think currently she's working for Kyle Moriarty for one of his shows. And so she's not a writer for one of these major publications. And so a lot of these big names in gaming journalism, rather than just like, giving her the credit, instead they basically treated her like crap. At first they were going on about how, well, she didn't warn the ESA before breaking the story, which was BS. That's completely untrue. And then they started writing articles basically retconning her from her own story. They started basically just saying how like word broke out, or they would reference another publication. So it's like, give credit where credit is due. This woman worked her ass off to break this story, and yet they're treating her like crap because she's not part of their clique of game journalists. It's disgusting. It really is disgusting. And it was like, you have people like Jason Schreier going after her and all that kind of stuff. It's like, is this really what gaming journalism is these days? It's if you're not part of the cool kids table, they just won't have anything to do with you. It really shows the state of modern gaming journalism and just how bad it is. But like I said, give credit where credit is due. This woman worked her ass off. She broke the story, and I should also put a disclaimer in that I do follow her on Twitter and I follow her on YouTube. She's done a very good job. She's done very good work, and I've always enjoyed it. So anyway, folks, I'm going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back after this. All right, folks, and we're back, and I want to talk about the strange case of the Ooblets saga. If you don't know what's going on, this is, oh boy, you better get some popcorn because this is going to be real good. So here's what happened. There's a game that's coming out called Ooblets, and it's kind of like Animal Crossing, Harvest Moon. It's kind of one of those games. And so this is a game that's been in development since 2016. It was slated to come out on Steam as well as the Xbox One. And just this past week, developers just decided to announce that, oh, by the way, it's no longer on Steam. Now it's an Epic Game Store exclusive. Now, just from that alone, you could probably tell it wasn't well received by gamers. And you'd be right. In fact, many gamers were not happy about this, and it's completely understandable because people don't like the Epic Game Store. Okay, it has a lot of problems. It's had problems with the fact that the store itself has no search or cart options. You have to buy every game individually, and if you buy too many games, they'll think that your personal information has been stolen and all, and then they'll basically just wipe your entire games library. The whole thing is an absolute mess. And then there's the whole controversy of it being spyware and basically going through your entire computer. There's also the amount of exclusives that EGS keeps swallowing up. The whole controversy with Shenmue 3, which was understandable because that game was crowdfunded, and when the Kickstarter was launched, they promised it was going to come out on Steam, and then just this past E3, they just decided, nope, it's coming out for EGS exclusively. Then there's the fact that the Ghostbusters, the video game, is getting remastered, but we're delisted the game and it's now going to be on Epic Game Store. It's just people don't like that. They don't like the fact that they have to go through all these hoops just to play their games. They don't like the fact that they have to download spyware. Overall, when people hear the words EGS, they get turned off immediately because no one wants anything to do with it. And yet the developer decided, rather than just sort of making the announcement and leaving it there, oh no, they decided to go after gamers. Because they knew people weren't going to be happy about this. They knew people weren't going to just not like it. And they went on this rant. They put out like a whole blog post on their website about this. And the one thing that kind of annoyed me is how they went after gamers, saying how oh, well, there's bigger issues to get angry of. Here's a few suggestions: climate change, human rights abuses. It's really, folks? Look, I understand that those are major issues, but don't change the subject and don't hide behind other subjects to deflect from your shitty behavior. That's what it is. That's exactly what this whole thing is. But wait, it gets better, because then they decided to go to their Discord and just crap all over gamers and talk about how they want to rip into gamers and how we don't care about them because now we have the Epic we have Epic money, we have Epic cash. Really? We don't need people to give us money. We now have it from Epic. We have Daddy Epic Games gave us money. Really? That's how you're going to act? And of course, gamers weren't happy about that. They were also calling, you also had these people, they're on Discord, and they're calling gamers, of course, toxic, which is that word is so overused, folks. That is just it's can you think of any other word to call someone just an asshole? Really? You have these toxic. It's basically a buzzword at this point. And then they also were calling them baby gamers. And it just, folks, this isn't how you act. This is not how you treat your customers, okay? If people have a problem, all right? If a customer has an issue, you don't tell them that they're toxic and that we don't need your money, all right? That's how you go broke, folks. That's not how you get a lot of money. The real funny thing, though, and this kind of caught my attention, because I'm okay, really? You're going there? Was Epic Games stepped into this whole thing, and they decided to put out a statement. Now, the first paragraph sounds all right. It sounds pretty good. It goes like this. We at Epic Games have often shared our views about the game business and companies in it, and we support the entire game community's right to speak freely and critically about these topics, including the topic of Epic, our products, and our store. When everyone shares their earnest views, the best ideas ultimately prevail. All right, that sounds fine, right? That sounds like something anyone can agree with. But then you get to the second paragraph, and oh boy. The announcement of Ooblets highlighted a disturbing trend which is growing and undermining healthy public discourse. That's the coordinated and deliberate creation of promotion of false information, including fake screenshots, videos, and technical analysis accompanied by harassment of partners, promotion of hateful themes, and intimidation of those with opposing views. So let me get this straight. You want everyone to share their opinions freely. You have no problem with that. Except you don't want anyone, if anyone shares their opinion, it's considered harassment. You heard that there, folks. Basically, me talking about this on the show is harassment. These, it really is amazing. They know that they screwed up. They know people are not really receptive to the Epic Games Store and this idea of exclusivity on there. And yet, they hide behind all of this stuff about how you're being toxic and you're being harassing us. No, folks, it's purely the fact that you made a poor business decision. Okay? You told people, by the way, we want you to buy our game on this service that nobody likes, and if you don't like it, then you're harassing us and you're toxic. That's the message that they're sending. It's like, okay, fine, you don't want my money. Okay? I'm not even interested in your game, but if I did have an interest, you basically just lost a customer. So it's just, this is not how you act. This is not how you treat customers. This is not potential customers even. So just, fair bit of warning. Never treat your customers like this. Never treat your customers like they're the problem. All right? So anyway, folks, I'm going to take a short break and we'll be right back after this. right, folks, and we're back. And this past week was very contentious for gaming. And most of you probably know exactly what I'm referring to. Just for context sake, I'm just going to mention it. Last weekend, of course, unfortunately, there were two shootings in the United States. One in El Paso, Texas, and the other in Dayton, Ohio. And it's downright terrible. It's absolutely horrible that anything like this had to actually happen. It's just, thoughts and prayers go to the friends, family, and victims. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know what to say other than it's just horrible that anything like this happened. But of course, as soon as any sort of terrible tragedy happens, you've got a bunch of people who like to point fingers and love to blame different things for all the ills in the world. And the big one was, of course, gaming. You had a lot of politicians and celebrities coming out and saying how we need to ban violent video games. Walmart has pulled several ads for violent games from their stores. It's getting really ridiculous. And I don't think I need to tell you all that violent games do not cause real violence. We all know that they don't. There's countless studies showing that they don't. Even the one that they love to trot out saying that, it proves it. That one study says that while violent games may, in rare cases, cause violent thoughts, it does not lead to violent actions. And they also suggested that people with severe psychological issues should not be playing such violent games. So basically, don't let the psych ward play Call of Duty. Now, you know how many studies there are that shows that video games do cause violence? I'll give you a hint. None. It's zero, nada. A big fat goose egg. There are 0 studies that show that violent games cause violence. Okay? There's no evidence to it. And it's both academic and it's anecdotal. Because all of us have grown up playing violent games. Like I played not Call of Duty. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six for the PS1. Like I played that when I was like 12 years old. I remember seeing a bunch of older kids I knew playing Doom. It doesn't cause violence. We know it doesn't cause violence. But you have these people who just are so convinced of it. And so the question is, if there's academic proof showing that violent games do not cause real violence, then why does this myth persist? Why does it continue so? I'll tell you why. It's because people like to blame all of the problems in the world on one thing. That's just how it has been for human history. You go back and to like a few decades. You go back to the 80s. You had people who wanted to blame all the violence in the world on heavy metal and D&D. You had in the 50s, you had people blaming comic books and rock and roll music for all the juvenile delinquency problems. So this isn't anything new. This is just another moral panic. But what gets me is how persistent it's been, how long it's been going on, because moral panics usually don't go on that long. They're only just like a few years and that's it. But this has gone on for at least 20 years. I know the violence in games debate has been going on for 25. I mean, you got the 1993, you had the congressional hearing regarding violence in video games. But to my knowledge, the first time a video game was blamed for violent actions was 20 years ago, 1999, the Columbine shooting. During the police investigation, they found that one of the shooters had a copy of Doom on their PC and had actually made several WADs for the game. And so you had this rumor that went around saying that the kids had actually trained on Doom. It also was going around that the kids had also created a WAD that was modeled after their school and that they used that to train, but nothing like that was ever found. In fact, there's no evidence that they used it to train at all, but the rumor persisted and kept going on. There was also 2007. There was the Virginia Tech shooting where Jack Thompson went around claiming that the shooter there had trained on Counter-Strike. Now, the thing is, there was no evidence that he had actually played Counter-Strike. None of the friends even knew if he played it. But still, that rumor persisted and it kept going, and people just kept blaming video games for all the problems in the world. Now, when it comes to these shootings, we know why they did it. It wasn't because of video games, it wasn't because of guns, it was purely political. These were acts of political extremism. They were, one was on the far, I think the El Paso shooter was on the far right and the Dayton shooter was on the far left. Okay? These people were politically motivated. It wasn't like they picked up a game and said, "Oh, now I want to go and kill people." No, they had a political motive for doing what they did. So to blame this on video games is just ridiculous. And it's tiresome. I'm really getting sick of it. I'm constantly, every time this debate comes up, every time some sort of terrible event happens and people start blaming video games, it annoys me. It really annoys me that we're still doing this. It's been 25 years since the congressional hearings in 1993, and we're still having this debate about violence in video games. Folks, get over it. It doesn't cause real violence. We know this, and yet you want to continue with it. Banning violent video games will do nothing. Actually, scratch that. It will do something. It'll promote piracy. People will just, even if you take all the violent games off the shelves, people will still torrent the hell out of this stuff. They'll just go to Pirates Bay. They'll just get their fix there. It's like people don't think, do they? They don't think that if you take something away, people will just find other means to get it. Look what happened with Prohibition. They banned alcohol, and then what happened? It's been said that more Americans drank during Prohibition than at any time in American history. So even entertaining the thought is just pointless. It's not going to work. You're not going to curb violent crime by banning video games or banning any inanimate object, really. It's not going to work, folks. All right, I'm going to take a short break and then we'll be right back after this. All right, folks, and that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for listening. If you've got any questions to be answered on next week's episode, just leave them down in the comments section. You can also follow me on several other platforms: YouTube, BitChute, SoundCloud, and even Dailymotion. I upload all that stuff to there. And that's it. So I'll see you all next week. And remember that video games will never die.